All right, Jon David Cole, glad to have you on the podcast, man.
I'm so glad to be here, Hunter. Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
I don't think you'll have any issue shooting a podcast. You got quite a few under your belt. And,
it's not my first rodeo. Yeah.
Don't have any issues talking to the mic. So, man, I'm really excited to get into this conversation and kind of talk about your life and what led you to the Country Squire.
Yeah.
But you'll be the first person that I do this for. This is a little guest read intro so everybody gets a little context on who we are.
Is this like a parental notification thing?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah. So my guest today has a connection to my family that goes back further than most people know. My grandparents, Jim and Gwen Reeves, opened the Country Squire in 1970. Years later, Jon David bought it from my mom and has built it into something even bigger than it ever was with them. Today, we're getting into that whole journey and what it's meant to carry something forward that started with people that I love. So this is a very personal episode for me, and I'm excited to get into it.
I'm honored to be here, man. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, glad to have you. So before we get into the Country Squire and everything we got going on there, let's kind of go back to where you grew up. Where'd you grow up, and what kind of kid were you?
Yeah, so I was born in Houston, Texas, but moved to Jackson as a really young child. Yeah, so this is home. I've been here my whole life, and schooling, went to Mississippi State, and then came back here after college. I was a history major at State and thought I was going to go, get into politics and run for Senate and
Really?
be involved in all these campaigns. And now I'm just a two-bit drug dealer. So
I love that two-bit drug dealer.
Yeah.
Where'd you go to high school?
Yeah, Northwest Rankin.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
just to the east of town here.
What year did you graduate from?
2002.
So there's a lot of Northwest Rankin people that are involved at Coyote.
Yeah, are they really?
Actually, Derek that went to Northwest. He was 03.
Did he really?
That you just
Okay,
met. Yeah.
awesome, man.
Yeah,
No,
so
that's great.
there's a lot of former Cougars involved.
Yeah,
at Coyote.
You got to be careful calling people cougar.
Yeah, that is funny. So, when you were growing up, did you were thinking at that time you were going to get into politics, even that age?
It's so funny, man. I definitely I think all my education and upbringing, I was certainly like right-brained, and so anything to do with reading, writing, comprehension, history, literature, all that kind of stuff just really intrigued me. And so, forever I knew, I'd probably be involved in something like that. Never in a million years thought, retail or e-commerce or the premium tobacco industry would be a part of it. But yeah, kind of early on thought, law school, and I enjoyed at the time politics and being involved, civically, and I was in a lot of different organizations related to that. And some of my first experiences actually were professional experiences were political. I couldn't be farther from that now.
Yeah. It's funny how life works.
Really funny, yeah.
So you read a lot when you were growing up?
I did,
What were you reading as a kid?
I was a Tolkien guy, and C.S. Lewis, and just the meta narratives of those stories and the overarching themes, they just grabbed me. And who doesn't like a good dragon or a good battle between good and evil? I don't know. It was I was certainly a kid full of imagination. So
Tolkien and Lord of the Rings was one of the first series I remember just really sucking me in and taking me to another world.
Yeah.
And I think I read The Hobbit first, and I love The Hobbit, and then The Lord of the Rings. And I don't know what it is. It's just it's cool at that age to kind of get transported to something completely different than what the area that you grow up in, and spend some time there when you're inside the book.
I agree. Especially growing up in Mississippi, and our family certainly wasn't poor. I mean, we had everything we needed, but we didn't travel a lot at all, really. And so, just imagining these scenes and these locations with all this, mountains and caves and valleys and swamps where, you're going through this stuff, trying to accomplish a mission or a goal. I don't know. There's a lot of good stuff in there that I think dovetails with, some of my personal belief system and, just struggle as a grown human that is pretty applicable today.
So what's interesting to me is, J.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, they met together when they were writing.
Yeah.
And they were good friends. And I think Tolkien is the one who brought C.S. Lewis to Christ.
To faith. Yeah. Isn't that wild?
It's such a crazy story.
Yeah, it's just amazing to me. To be a fly on the wall, you know. And of course, I just revel at the fact that they were both pipe smokers.
Yeah.
But you know, I think Tolkien was really concerned about Lewis's heart. And of course, Lewis was really smart, and you know, a lot of people that becomes a stumbling block. Mm-hmm. You know, the Lord, I think, uses that by design. So
absolutely
interesting.
What took you to Mississippi State?
Yeah, Dad went to State, and I visited all these schools and got a really good scholarship at several places. But you know, State was a good fit for me for a lot of reasons. You know, I did have the family tie, but there's something about Mississippi State that is like a kind of a everyman feel to it. You know, it's not pretentious at all. It's very you know, accessible and relatable, I think, to common people, which I certainly was, you know, at the time. It just felt like home. I remember going to visit all these, you know, campuses all over the South. And when I went to State, I felt like I was kind of going home, you know? So, I was a Bulldog and, you know, was really glad to be there. Yeah. You know, was in a fraternity, actually with your brother, which going back, I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah.
And, Phi Delta Theta there at State. And, yeah, enjoyed that, got really involved in student government and was student body president at State.
Oh, were you? Cool.
And Mr. MSU. Yeah. Wow. Was real active in political stuff back then.
So how is that? How does that process go? Do you put your name up or does somebody nominate you? Do you have a campaign? What happens?
Yeah, that's right. So I remember we, you campaign, and I think I nominated myself because I was really arrogant and still struggle with that.
That's the politics.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. That's right. Somewhere in the mix, I think I got saved and kind of shucked a lot of that stuff off. But yeah, you know, put it up. We ran campaigns, and matter of fact, the fraternity even did silly stuff. You know, I think they painted my name on the back of a bunch of, you know, pledges and made them run across the drill field, which is kind of our center quad at State.
Was my brother one of those that got his...
I can't remember that. I can't remember that.
That would be funny.
Yeah, that may have been a little before his time. I can't remember, but that, yeah, it was crazy, man. It was a lot of fun and good experience. You know, a lot of emotions tied up with that. You know, really when I was in those positions, to be honest with you, even starting back in high school when I was starting to get involved in student government stuff and then carrying that forward to the collegiate level, you know, all this political stuff. I grew up as an only child and was very lonely, you know, and didn't have a lot of close friends. You know, Dad worked a lot and Mom did too. And, you know, I think I found politics as an outlet to receive affirmation. And when I figured out that I could do that, when I figured out that, I give a speech and people clap for me and congratulate me afterwards, like that was like crack cocaine. Really. Yeah. Like it was something that, you know, kind of a starved young kid really, just really took to, you know. It's like, oh wow, this feels good for people to acknowledge me and accept me and, you know, love me. And so, I kind of followed it to its end, you know, through high school and then college. And, so I have a lot of mixed emotions about that season of life. You know, looking back, I accomplished a lot of really neat things. Of course, gosh, this is, you know, a couple decades ago at this point, but I was a sad person, you know. I was lonely and, unfulfilled. And, I remember getting to kind of the top of the food chain at State, you know, certainly related to all that stuff. And, you know, Mr. MSU, and I remember it was homecoming my senior year, and, you know, I was walking out on the 50-yard line at the football stadium. And, you know, at the end of the day, I was, even with all that, I was still very alone. I was reminded of that Tom Brady interview that he did. I can't remember with whom, but where he talked about accomplishing it all. Super Bowl champion. He's dating a supermodel, and got all this money, and he still at the end said, there's got to be more.
I remember seeing that. Tom Brady's fascinating to me because just about everybody would agree he's the greatest football player of all time.
Yeah.
And then you see what he's doing now, and like he's doing wrestling stunts, and it's just like he can't let go of that spotlight and that fame, and he's getting roasted on Netflix and all this type of stuff. And
I'm telling you, man,
and not able to kind of sail off into the sunset and still searching for something.
And again, never met the guy.
Yeah.
Obviously, he could be happy as a clam, but certainly in my experience, there was something lacking.
Yeah.
And I think wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah.
And that's been on my mind a lot recently, even.
Really?
And so.
So you mentioned mixed emotions. What is it? How do you feel about that season now? That's different than how you felt about it then.
I think it was really formative for me, and I think I wouldn't be who I am in a lot of ways without that. I needed to experience worldly success and affirmation and realize that there had to be something else. I needed that. Some people don't need that, and I needed that. I think the Lord knew I needed that. And it's funny. I just, in thinking about some of my story, if you're watching, you can see I've bearded guy, ponytail. I was a very different person back then. Clean cut, seersucker suit, bow tie. Little Jackson Swoosh haircut that we all used to have. And so life's changed a lot, and I think the exterior changes are indicative of heart changes. And so that's good.
Yeah,
I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So you, Mr. Mississippi State, graduate. What was your major?
History
major.
Yep.
So where'd you go from there?
Came to Jackson after spending a year in recruiting for Mississippi State. And my first job in Jackson.
Hold on, let's talk about that, because I had a recruiter for Ole Miss on the podcast before. What was that year
no
like?
Way. Yeah. It was really interesting. Yeah, I loved State. I loved Starkville, and wanted to recruit people to come to the university. And it was a good kind of easy entry level job, once you get out of school. And they handed me this terrible territory. It included North Mississippi, which was included all these like podunk towns like Hickory Flat and Jumpertown and Biggersville, and just all these places that it's not the end of the world, but you can see it from there. And then also Oxford, which is the home of Ole Miss, who is our arch rival. And so I remember just very vividly driving my Mississippi State minivan on the square at Ole Miss, and this girl dropping all of her textbooks and being like, "Eee!" Having to go into some of those high schools was tough, but going to rural high schools where kids, a lot of them had never met a professional before. A lot of them, these are a lot of students that didn't have family members that were bankers or doctors or attorneys or whatever. And so they, a lot of these folks didn't know what to do and didn't know what they wanted to do. And we're trying to figure it out. And to me, it was kind of sweet to open up some of the world to them a little bit. And, folks were amazed at what you can study and learn. And there's a whole universe out there. So, yeah.
So you go from the recruiting for a year, and then what'd you say you went to next after that?
Yeah, so went to Watkins & Young law firm after that.
Which
and
is
that's
where
actually
we met.
Where you and I met. And I was their marketing director for a couple of years. And, it's funny. In graduating school with a history degree and wanting to be an attorney, that's where I learned that
you didn't want to be an attorney.
I didn't want to be an attorney. Those folks were so kind to me. They really were. But there's a lot of that environment that was just kind of a mess. I mean, these were people that didn't have a lot of time, and I felt like the environment was a little adversarial, and and so and when you're spending all that time traveling and in the courtroom, or just doing drafting things, it I don't know, it takes a toll on your relationships and with your family and friends and with yourself, your health.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that and just thought, I don't think this is for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I actually really considered going to law school for a very long time too, and working at the law firm was another piece of the puzzle for me, knowing that I didn't want to go.
Yeah.
But that was my job all through college. And I think while I was there, I thought you were a lawyer. I don't even think they really told me. Like, this is our newest guy. And I figured you were just a lawyer.
Just some attorney,
you had a desk. You're working at the computer all day. But
so funny.
I liked that job because it was really flexible for me. It was a smaller law firm. And so I would just come in around my baseball schedule, and I was a runner, so I'd be like, what do you need me to do? And like, I drive to Hattiesburg, and I got paid by the mile. So for a college kid, that's
pretty good deal.
Good money.
Yeah.
And so I'd get in my car, drive to Hattiesburg, drop off some documents, and drive back.
Isn't that crazy?
And where a lot of times I just go to the grocery store and restock the fridge or whatever.
Yeah.
But I worked there the whole time, and they were super nice people.
Really kind folk. Mm-hmm. They really were, and took good care of me. While
I was there, they were working on the King Edward.
Yeah,
so
that's right. So I got roped into some of that.
I bet.
I did. So one of the partners was kind of a real estate developer-ish. Mm-hmm. Long story there, but anyway, he kind of roped me into some of his early projects, which involved downtown revitalization. If you're not from the Jackson area, good context is, Jackson is a struggling, southern town, lots of white flight in the 70s and 80s, shelled out, hollowed out downtown area that, needs a lot of revitalization, a lot of vacant properties and all that stuff. And so, anyway, back, 15, 20 years ago, there was a group of professionals here in town that were pretty high on getting it kind of going again.
Mm-hmm.
And so they started purchasing up some properties down there. And, I was a young, starry-eyed kid that was like, man, I'd love to be involved in taking one of these 100-year-old, Art Deco buildings and, turning it into apartments or whatever. And,
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was cool. And anyway, so I did that for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting just thinking about my story and the tracing it to the Country Squire. I was just a kid really that didn't know what he wanted to do with his life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really was.
Mm-hmm.
And, so there was, I always envied people, Hunter, that, got out of college and, they had an accounting degree. So they went to be an accountant, or they were a doctor. And so they went to be a doctor
mm-hmm.
or an engineer. And the clarity of that just, eluded me. And,
mm-hmm.
I think now I realize it as a blessing. Certainly you have, recognized that in your career and profession, and I have too. But, but back then, to me, it felt unbuoyed.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't really have an idea of what was next.
I resonate so much with that. And
mm-hmm.
I've really thought about it a lot recently, in like, why am I not content just to go get a job and work in a 9-to-5 like other people.
Yeah.
And I've never felt like I could do that, and it's led me to do, Coyote and all these other things. But I see so many other people that are able to go to college and then get their degree and go take their job. Then, they work their way up their role or whatever. And I'm like, why am I wired so differently for that? And I think it is what leads so many people into entrepreneurship or to owning a business, because it is unbuoyed. I've never thought of it that way, but that is the feeling that it is, like unsettled, like I'm not in the right place, or I need to be doing something else, or I
don't have a baseline, and no one's there to teach you.
Right.
No, I mean, you can find your own teachers, but no one's there to teach you. I was actually chatting with your mom a little bit earlier, Kim,
mm-hmm.
and who hired me years ago and who's very dear to me for a lot of reasons. But we were laughing about all the stuff you got going on and Meredith's got going on and your family, and she said something like, our family, we just don't like to work for other people.
That's very true. Very
and
true.
I think there's something beautiful about that. I will say about myself, and I think we've been relatively successful. at what we've done. But that is not my natural bend, Hunter. My natural bend is to follow a path and to have a plan and to have clarity, not take a lot of risks. And so I really literally had to stumble into what I'm doing.
Yeah. So you were at the law firm. At what point did you decide, all right, I'm not going to law school. This is not what I want to do. Was it early on or?
Yeah, it was a few years there. I spent maybe 3 or 4 years there, and then had a very brief interaction with real estate, and then went to try to do some marketing on my own for some people, and then was even a financial advisor. I'd gotten my Series 6 and Series 7 and all that kind of stuff, and I was registered to buy and sell stocks and bonds and all this. It was crazy, man. I just threw it, throwing it at the wall, seeing what sticks. And at some point, I had struggled with a lot of insecurity and depression and stuff like that, and therapy had been really helpful to me. And so I was like, you know what? I think I might try to be a counselor. This is mid to late 20s. And so I applied actually as part of all the soup of things that I did in my 20s. I applied to Reform Theological Seminary here in Jackson.
Wow.
And as part of their marriage and family therapy program. And they were foolish enough to let me in, and and so spent about 1.5 years there and studying to be a counselor, and that was really formative time for me. I didn't finish that degree, but it was really, really important, and that was the season I came to work at the Country Squire.
So where were you living when you were at RTS?
Lived in Jackson, okay. So. Yeah, I think by that point I'd bought a house. We live in a neighborhood called Belhaven, which historic neighborhood just to the north of downtown. Is the first subdivision of Jackson, or first suburb of Jackson, actually, in the early 20th century. And so all these really old houses, and because I didn't have real steady income, I had loaded that house up with all these, roommates that I found on Craigslist and all this stuff. It was bonkers.
What was that experience like, getting a roommate off of Craigslist?
Man, I tell you what, the guy, that particular individual that I'm thinking about, he, I'll never forget that. He was very kind. He was a bartender at a local bar, and he was also really into judo. And so, he always had a bunch of martial arts related things around. And one day he left the house and he never came back. He had lived with me at this point for probably 6 months, and he left the house, and we didn't know each other super well, but he was always up to his own thing. We weren't in each other's business a lot, and I was like, man, I hadn't seen him in a while, and we had some other roommates and friends that were around. They're like, yeah, we haven't seen him, and we'd knock on his door, no one would answer, and his car was never anywhere, and after about a week, I
kind of getting worried here.
I go in his room, and and we find it's just covered in throwing stars and nunchucks and all this stuff, and we're starting to get worried, and so we actually went to his place of work, which was the bar. We went to his sensei or whatever to be like, have y'all heard from this guy? And no one had. Turns out the guy had been arrested.
Oh,
and we just had no clue. and eventually, what happened is, again, never saw him ever again. But I did have a dear friend who saw him driving across town one time, 1.5 years after that.
So he got out.
He got out, and Godspeed. I hope he's up to profitable things. So anyway.
I can only imagine what the experience of having roommates from Craigslist would be like.
Yeah, it was wild, man. Yeah. It was a good experience for me, not growing up with siblings.
Yeah.
I needed to be around people, and I needed to share some space with people. I needed to, rub against each other and work out problems and personality differences and opinions about this and that, and living with a ton of different guys during that period was, I think, a really healthy thing. I mean, I probably had 16 or 18 people filter through that house, in a 6 or 7 year period.
Are there any of them that you still keep in touch with?
Oh yeah, yeah,
cool.
dear friends of mine.
Awesome.
Yeah. Some of them went on to go to seminary themselves, graduate, and now pastors. Some are small business owners. Involved in all kinds of stuff. So
that's really cool.
Good guys.
And during that season is when you found yourself at the Country Squire.
Yeah,
So what brought you there?
I had always been a pipe and cigar smoker. Particularly the pipe. Growing up, I don't know about, your youth experience, but growing up in Rankin County, which is a little more blue collar and kind of out, when I was growing up out there, it was a little more out in the country. And, when we turned 18 back then, everyone started dipping and chewing and smoking. And I was really arrogant, and I was better than them. So I was going to smoke a pipe. Like, keep your Copenhagen, keep your Grizzly, keep your Redman, like, hand me the pipe. And, just thinking I was going to kind of channel this, modern day Lewis or something, or Albert Einstein. And, took to it from a really young age. And, as soon as I turned legal smoking age, which at the time was 18, it's 21 now, but, and so had smoked a pipe all through college and after, and I would go into the Country Squire, and your grandmother generally was there and would serve me and weigh up my pipe tobacco. And I went in there one day, and I'd been in more recently at the time because I was like smoking my pipe a little more and kind of getting back into the rhythm of it. And your mom was there. And she was there helping your grandmother, and I said, look, I'm at RTS now, studying. I need some part-time work, 10, 20 hours a week or whatever. And if y'all are ever looking for help, I'd love to talk to you about working here. And your mom told me they would get people to come in a smoke the shop like that all the time asking for work. I mean, who doesn't want to work at a pipe and cigar shop? It's really a lot of fun. So they were constantly having to turn people away like that. And your mom told me the story of having, kind of sitting up in bed and being like, I think that might actually be a good idea.
Really?
Yeah. Like I had known your brother a little bit in college, and had been coming around the shop and was a little familiar with stuff. And something led your mom to kind of take a gamble on me,
Wow.
And she called her mom, and they kind of powwowed a little bit and decided to hire me. And, so I was just coming in, a little bit here and there, and blending up pipe tobacco and sweeping the floor, and pricing cigars. And it was one of those things you never think you're gonna do for a living. And certainly I was very part-time at that point, but that's how I started at the Country Squire.
So I'll go back and tell you my experience with tobacco as well, because you kind of brought it up. But growing up in the tobacco shop, I was there all the time. I worked there. I told you this. I worked there from when I could barely see over the counter.
When you went to school, basically across the street.
Yeah. We would go there after school. We'd have our birthday parties there. I'd work there, and somewhere maybe junior high, because I know it was before I could drive, because I'd have to get dropped off. I'd start working on Saturday morning, so I'd play a football game Friday night and come in 9 a.m. Saturday morning and see the people sitting in their cars waiting for the liquor store to open. That's like, man, it's 9 a.m. and they're just waiting for the doors to open. But anyway, so I'd work on Saturday mornings there. And so I was just always around it, so much so that I would leave and people would be like, Hunter, have you been smoking? You're like 13 years old. No, I just been mixing tobacco. But so I was just around it so much. It was never something that made me want to do it. I don't know, just growing up in that environment. But
I chuckled to myself the other day. You came by the shop and I offered you a cigar, and you were like, I'm not going to smoke that.
So my senior year when I turned 18, my my grandmother, I think, gave me one of the long pipes, because this was
the church
the year
pipe.
the year the Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King came out, so they were really big. And so I would get that, and I would take the pipe tobacco, and then we go to parties with like high school parties.
That's
and
so
me and
funny.
my friends would smoke it, and we didn't really know what we were doing, but we were just smoking it, and everybody would be looking at us like, "What are y'all doing?" And my friends nicknamed it Hermangela. That was the name of the pipe. And so we would, and then it didn't last very long, and so I just never really got into it. But that was. That's so funny to think about.
I think as I'm kind of marveling a little bit at listening to you talk.
Yeah.
I don't want to turn this around and
absolutely.
me be the interviewer.
I'd love to.
But what's interesting about that is what you just described is so, and that's also, by the way, the same way my kids are growing up.
Mm-hmm.
What you just described, I think, is so foreign to almost every listener you probably have.
Absolutely.
Think about having the modern smoking culture, which is very different from when your grandmother and grandfather started the Country Squire in 1970.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole idea of like having lots of young kids around
mm-hmm.
involved in that kind of business.
Mm-hmm.
Like I tell my friends about it, and also just people that, I meet randomly, and they're like, "You do that?" Like you grew up as a tiny child, like around premium tobacco products,
yeah.
and it was okay.
And we didn't think anything.
It was okay.
We didn't think anything of it. It was just what we did. It was my grandmother and my aunt Kit at the time, and they were there, and so we would go, and we loved going to see them and spending time with them after school and having our birthday parties there, and being around tobacco.
You're the shop that your grandparents started and that your mom and aunt helped run in later years. Our business has a very different DNA.
Mm-hmm.
It's always made us different, and we're very proud of that, very fiercely protective of it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something about lighting up a pipe with someone. It's very disarming. If you do that, you'll tell the other person across the table anything they want to know.
Mm-hmm.
But the people that come into the Country Squire, particularly, are gentle people for the most part.
Absolutely.
And so I know to a lot of your viewers and listeners, it probably is very like such a crazy idea, having a kid grow up around a tobacco shop, but it was right and good and
mm-hmm.
honorable. It
mm-hmm.
really was. And for our family, it is.
Mm-hmm.
It still is.
And especially somebody who ended up opening up a gym and,
I know, I'm sitting here like across from this, paragon of health, like, statue of David, and like, it's just funny thinking, you grew up in the tobacco industry. Yeah.
And, I do think it instilled in me the desire to be a business owner. And I can remember, as long as I remember, even, I wanted to be a professional baseball player. That was pretty much my goal my entire young life. And even at that point, I was thinking, well, once I get done with sports, I'm going to own my own business. And I didn't know what it was, but just growing up around that. And then also my mom had started her own business when I was in second or third grade out of the home, just growing around people who ran a business. That just was kind of in my DNA and kind of what I wanted to do. Well, when you started working at the Country Squire, what did you know about it other than that was where you went to buy?
Hardly
tobacco?
anything.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that there was this sweet, precious, sophisticated lady that would serve me every time I went in there. I knew that her name was Gwen, and I knew I really liked Cherokee.
Yep, as many others did. Yeah.
Yep, which was our bell cow tobacco for so many years, and we still sell a lot of it at the Squire. But that's all I knew really, and I didn't know. I thought I was getting a job to help push a broom around and make some sales. Maybe on the weekends or whatever. But to be honest with you, I didn't really know I was entering into a story.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't fully know what I was getting myself into,
mm-hmm.
and it was God ordained.
Mm-hmm.
It was because that's exactly what happened, and the Lord was merciful, and here we are today.
Yeah. So how did that progress from part-time work into? I don't know how long you were there before my grandmother passed.
So she hired me almost a year before she died.
Okay.
I only got to know Mrs. Reeves for about a year. And if you're listening, just know this was one of the most interesting ladies, certainly of her era. You know, she was 89 when she passed away. She, I think, had graduated from LSU in like 1939 or something. Like she had a piano scholarship and like was just very. This was a sophisticated Southern lady. She was well educated, well spoken, well read, curious about the world, curious about people, opinionated, but kind, and quirky. Mm-hmm. She was all those things. And man, she smeared her imprint all over me during that year.
Wow.
And it was one of the, it's interesting because it was probably one of the most difficult years of my whole life during that exact season. And your grandmother was just a balm for my soul. It was like she was this, minister to me every day when I would come to work. We developed some similar, or recognized some similar interests in one another. We were both into gardening and plant life and things like that. And then both knew and loved the Lord and talked a lot about our spiritual lives. And I remember very vividly your grandmother, she said, I want you to come with me Saturday after we close the shop up. I want you to come with me, and we're going to go to Lakeland Yard and Garden. and I actually went with your grandmother a couple times to Lakeland Yard and Garden just to shop for some plants. Man.
Wow!
We went out there and bought some flowers, and then one weekend I came into work and I was on my way out after we'd shut the shop down, and she said, "I've got a little present for you in the back of my car." She drove this ancient Saturn, it was probably not roadworthy, and I opened it up, and she had bought me a sweet olive tree.
Wow! And
it was in the back of her car, and I took it home and planted it, and I really lamented the fact that I had to leave that tree at my former house, but it was really kind. She really did love me. It was a sweet thing. But yeah, I got to work with her about a year. And then she passed away, and of course your mom inherited the business, and also your mom by that point had been very heavily involved in the business. Your grandmother had developed dementia, and we were I was working for her, but I was also kind of part caretaker a little bit, and run errands for her. We did groceries and this kind of stuff, and so your mom had gotten real involved in the business, and
did she send you to Rainbow Grocery?
Had to go to Rainbow and buy some. I can't remember what I had to buy there.
I want to tell you a quick story about that, because when I worked there, she would send me to Rainbow with this list of all these vitamins that I had to get.
All this, yeah.
And I would walk in there, and it's just it was a completely different place when you walk in there, like entering another world. So,
if you're, for those not familiar, like Rainbow Groceries, this it's not in Jackson anymore, but you've got this kind of sleepy, conservative Southern town, and you walk in this hole in the wall, quote unquote, grocery store, and it's just a bunch of hippies that smell like feet.
Yeah, it was.
But if you wanted, like, it was kind of our answer to Whole Foods at the time.
My grandmother was so into holistic health. And she had a compost pile out back, and so she was always up on what vitamins she wanted. So she would send me with the list, and I would get it. So I went there all the time. Well, then she passed, and then 2 years ago, my wife and I, Claire, took our girls down to Ocean Springs for a weekend getaway, and we stayed on the main road, and we'd walk up and down the road, and I saw this small little grocery store, and I was like, that kind of reminds me of Whole Foods a little bit. And I went in there, and there was an old lady who was probably close to my grandmother's age, and I saw her working behind the desk, and I left, and I told Claire, I said, that lady reminded me of my grandmother, like she's working at the business. It's like a Friday evening, and she kind of interacted the way my grandmother did.
Yeah.
So anyways, the next day we go back in and I start talking to her and I was like, is this your store? And she's like, yeah, it's my store or whatever. And I was like, I'll tell you, this store reminds me of the Rainbow grocery store that was in Jackson. And she said, well, I actually started the Rainbow grocery store.
No way.
She said,
get out of here.
She said, I opened up the Rainbow grocery store in Jackson, and then my family wanted me to open this up on the coast. And so I came down here and opened it up.
I'll be
damned.
damned.
I was like, my grandmother used to come in your store all the time, and I told her about it. She said, I remember the Country Squire. I used to go to the liquor store, and
that is
they used to
so
go to
funny.
to Poets, the bar behind that my grandmother went to. And I was like, you probably remember my grandmother. And it was just so fascinating.
Wait, man, talk about just out of the blue.
Yeah, it was so crazy because she just I don't know what it was about her, but she reminded me of my grandmother. And then she's
praise the Lord that connection was made,
cool.
Yeah.
Such a cool story.
Oh, that's really neat. I'm glad it makes me want to go down there.
Yeah. So
that's incredible.
So how did you progress from there? I know my mom took on a ton because she had her own business. She had a lot going on.
She had 4 kids, and a couple of them were in college, and one was about to go to college, and maybe you were out at that point. I can't remember.
I was working now.
Yeah, all the the progression of all that. But I remember she called me. I was at seminary. I just got done seeing a client in our counseling center, and your mom I knew your grandmother was sick, and your mom was real serious, and she said, well, I want you to know Mama passed away, and you're the manager now of our store. And I was like, well, dang. It hit me really hard because, again, this was probably one of the most tender times of my life, for a lot of reasons that, I was just really depressed at the time, to be honest with you. And your grandmother was very kind to me, and the Lord sent her to really minister to my heart. And I took your grandmother's death very hard. It was brutal, to be honest. And so your mom trusted me with the business after that, and certainly just the managerial part of helping customers at the counter, and ordering a few things and doing some book work and, things like that. It was, your mom was still real heavily involved in the business, but, started giving me some responsibility because she needed help. Yeah. I mean, she had her own successful business, and your dad had his ministry, and all the kids were involved in all their stuff. And, and then there's this, retail shop that, is, that had been taken, it just tucked away, and it's like, well, what do we do with this now?
Mm-hmm.
And, you were very much into, sports and health, and, it's, one of those things is like, well, Hunter probably doesn't want to run the smoke shop.
Yeah.
And, and I was there, and, we just kind of made it work.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, at the time, so this is 2012. 2012. At the time, the Country Squire had been there for we opened in 1970, so that had been like 42 years at that point. Yeah. The Country Squire had been left behind a little bit. Your grandmother, her husband Jim, died in the early 80s, and and your grandmother wasn't really a smoker. And so she did her best to keep up with products and stuff. But, again, she was an 89-year-old lady, and, running a smoke shop. And there were some trends in premium tobacco that she had kind of, lost sight of a little bit, or just didn't get plugged in on. And so what happened, in the 70s and 80s, if you were a premium tobacco user, let's say you're a sophisticated, surgeon or an attorney or something, you were a pipe smoker.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you were. Pipes were king back then.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, our children's hospital here in Jackson is named after Dr. Blair Batson, who's now deceased, but he was a very well-respected physician here in Jackson, and even nationally. And if you go in the lobby of the Children's Hospital here in Jackson, there's the portrait of Dr. Batson, and he's holding his pipe that he bought at the Country Squire.
Really? My grandmother, she said this 1,000 times. Pipe smokers live longer than anyone.
She did, and I almost got it tattooed on myself, man. I did. It was just amazing. Pipe smokers live longer.
And I would always be like, I don't know if that's true.
It is true, Hunter. Believe it. Believe it. It was so funny. But what happened in the 1990s, and if you're old enough to remember, we had Cigar Aficionado came out. Yeah. Michael Jordan was at the top of his game, and Arnold Schwarzenegger. You had all these guys. They were smoking cigars, and there was this cigar boom that happened in the 90s. And if you're in my industry, you recognize that term, the cigar boom. And it really, from the early 90s on to close to 2000, it just transformed the premium tobacco industry, and all the money and energy, and really a lot of the creativity too, and the infrastructure of our industry, it swung very heavily from the pipe to the cigar, and that was a pivot your grandmother never made, and she was hell bent on selling a doggone pipe, and I praise God for it. Because it makes us unique. It is so much a part of who we are. But because of that, the shop at the time when she passed away, it was lacking some modern sensibility, things to appeal to modern sensibilities that the modern consumer had kind of adopted. And so, your mom and I and the part-time help that we hired there, we kind of had to go to work. Bringing the shop to life a little bit, and by God's grace and a whole lot of sweat equity, we did it,
So how long was that time period before she approached you about, I don't even know how it went when you purchased the business, but how long was that transition period?
So let's see, I purchased it, it's 10 years ago now. I purchased it in 2016.
Okay, so that was a pretty good amount of time.
And then I worked for your mom there for several years, 4 or 5 years, I guess, before that. And, we were hungry. I mean, I had bills, and your mom was like, I don't know what we're going to do with the shop. And, she wanted to make it successful because it was her parents' legacy, and she'd worked there in her young days. And so did her sister, who was deceased at the time, and all her kids. And, so we had a lot of emotional and financial incentive to get this thing humming. And, one thing about the Country Squire, if you go into a modern cigar shop, a lot of times you're met with some kind of seedy, unsavory characters. That's just the nature of our industry. And the Squire has always been different. It has always been different. We've always had a very heavily female influence on our business. Your grandmother, over the years, she got to know the wives of her customers better than she did the smoker themselves, because the wife would be the one to come in there and buy the pipe tobacco or the cigar or whatever it was. And those relationships were really strong. There was a safety net there. There was a respect there, and it was a place that husbands, didn't have to apologize to send their wife to, because they knew that it was a whole, a wholesome place. Our clientele has always been just littered with professors and pastors and counselors and all these interesting creative types that are thoughtful people. And so with the rise of the modern cigar culture that was a little more low rent, as your grandmother would have said, we just never had that in our DNA. And so I knew it was different. I recognized that it was different. And in all of our marketing, all of our push to gain customers, get customers back who had left us years before, we really appealed to that.
So what kind of marketing were you doing? Because it went from non-existent to something, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, around just a few years before then, of course, social media had started, right? And so, matter of fact, I remember getting my first Facebook account right when it came out. I think I was a junior in college. Gosh, it's going way back, crazy to think of. And so we started there, doing social media stuff, and then they had done some internet business before, but then it had gotten shut down. And then when I got there, I realized that wasn't happening at the time. And so, the goal was kind of to get that back online, navigate the online stuff enough to where we could, sell our products online to the world. Again, remember at the time, the whole premium market was in the cigar side of the world, but we were a pipe shop and are a pipe shop. And there are not many pipe shops left in the world, not much less just the United States. And so we needed to get our products, our world-class tobaccos that, had this venerated history that had been around forever. We had third-generation customers that had been smoking some of these same blends since the early 70s, before you and I were both born. And we had to get it in front of people in Japan and New Jersey and, Scotland. And we had to do it. It was our way to continue to exist in that ecosystem. And by golly, we did it. And it really took off. It's amazing. I think, you walk in our shop and there is a little sense that like places like this don't really exist anymore.
Right.
You've got these jars, they're full of pipe tobacco. There's a, scale that was, manufactured when, John F. Kennedy was president, and, you're weighing up this stuff. The guy behind the counter sometimes is wearing an apron. I mean, it's just a very different experience, And so we really played that up both locally and online, and it helped us a lot. Yeah, it really did.
So how did you progress during that 5-year period to the point where you ended up purchasing the business?
Well, I knew, like, at some point, for me to make it work for me, and I wanted to have a family and, all that. I was like, I need to kind of grow my income. And that's when your mom and I started talking about, me potentially purchasing the business from her. But, in that interim period, we had grown significantly. And, the business, I think, was a lot more valuable. It was really special. I have to mention, of course, that a big part of that was our podcast. We started a podcast in 2013 called Country Squire Radio.
Okay, so you started it before you had purchased it.
I did.
Okay,
I sure did. Yeah, and it was you ready for this? It was the number one pipe smoking podcast in the world.
Oh, I know. I'm very well aware. My mom told me quite a few times.
We were even top 5 a couple of times in the hobby category in the United States. Yeah. It was bonkers.
So you kind of got in when podcasts were just starting to take off. Where did the idea come from?
So I have a dear friend whose name is Bo York. He lives in Texas now. But this is a guy that is super creative. You want to talk about right-brained, energetic, always up for trying something new and interesting and different. Podcasting was just a glimmer at that point. Now everyone's got a no offense, but like, if you can fog up a mirror and have an iPhone, you can have a podcast. It might not be well produced, but you can have a podcast. But back then the barrier to entry was a little higher. I'm not a tech guy. I was a seminarian that had recently dropped out so I could work full time at this smoke shop that had a questionable future, and Bo, he read the tea leaves. Yeah. He saw this and he said, no, this is different. People are they are a captive audience. You are in their ear every day in their most intimate moments, whether they're coming and going to work, while they're working, while they're cooking. It is intimate and different, and you're connecting with people. There is a future in this podcasting stuff. He just saw it. And he was looking for people in his life who were into interesting things. And managing a 40-year-old pipe shop and blending pipe tobacco by hand was pretty esoteric,
I would agree.
And he was like, look, there's pipe smokers all over the world. It's a niche business, but there's people all over the world and they're starving for content because no one's paying attention to them. Why don't we give it a shot? And I told him no.
Really?
I didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
I don't like being in the limelight anymore. By that time, I'd kind of dealt with a lot of my demons, and the background was just fine to me. And I didn't want to be on mic. I didn't want people to hear my voice. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. Who's going to listen to, a podcast about pipe smoking?
Yeah.
It just sounded silly to me. And so I told him I'd do it. He's very persistent, poor Bo, and very persistent. And I told him I'd do it. And I knew in my heart of hearts that it would last about 6 months.
Yeah.
And then we'd go find something else to do, and he would be satiated that, hey, we tried it, and isn't that something? When I tell you that it took off, it exploded. And the Country Squire was already known in our neck of the woods, but all of a sudden, these pipe smokers from all over the world got introduced to what was a hidden gem, and it transformed the nature of our business.
How long was it before it really kind of you guys were like, we got something here?
Yeah, it was. I mean, within the first year. I mean, we knew within the first year.
You were putting them out once a week, right?
We were putting them out once a week. We did it for 10 years. It was 500 episodes.
Yeah.
And
within the first 50, you knew. Huh?
Within the first 50, we knew.
Wow.
There was something special happening. People were we were stunned. People were driving to the Country Squire to meet us. They were requesting our tobaccos to be autographed by people on staff. It was crazy.
Wow.
I mean, again, these are the tobaccos that you grew up blending, and we were happy to get in the hands of, someone from Pearl, Mississippi. And all of a sudden, folks from Hackensack, New Jersey were just fawning over this stuff. And it was crazy. And people were, that we had so many visitors to the shop, physical visitors, that that people, we started calling it our pipe pilgrimage. So we have these pipe pilgrims, and they still come to this day. And we have a map in the store that's just littered with pins from, all these different interesting places where folks have visited from, including other continents at this point. But we knew we'd had something special pretty early. Yeah, it was a sweet season. And right before that, we had just gotten our online business up and running. And so it was there again, like this jolt of energy into the business. All of a sudden, these mail orders came in, and because you had this worldwide audience, these poor little pipe smokers had been left behind in the 90s, and no one was paying attention to them anymore. And now all of a sudden, you had a professionally produced podcast that was all about them. And they were hungry, and we gave them a place to come and invite them not just into our pipe experience, but into the Country Squire's narrative. Like, you grew up seeing it, you grew up being a part of it, and the whole goal of it was to take that special experience that our interesting little shop was, and bring it to the world. And much like Tolkien and Lewis, you're inviting people into this narrative that all of a sudden can become their own. You can't pay for that.
Right.
You can't pay for that. You can't recreate that. There's just a special sauce that happens there that gives people a sense of, oh, well, I live in Iowa, but the Country Squire is my tobacconist.
Wow.
You've
had people tell you that?
Yeah.
Wow. And
they call on the phone and they're like, oh, it's Jon David Cole.
They recognize your voice.
It's so interesting. I go to these pipe shows. Even today, we haven't done the podcast now for a couple of years. And even today, I'll be at the Chicago Pipe Show, biggest pipe show in the world, and I'll just kind of be incognito, browsing, different pipes and looking at inventory and stuff I want to buy for the shop or myself, and then I'll open my mouth. And of course, if you're from Mississippi and you own it, you kind of sound like you fell off a turnip truck. And I've had people turn to me in awe and be like, oh, you're Jon David Cole.
Wow.
And these are people from all over the world. It's the craziest thing, man. But, all that is because of our podcast.
Uh-huh.
It's because of our podcast.
Wow.
And we developed friends from all over. A man and his son were visiting the U.S. They were in Las Vegas for a wedding. They were from Australia's Gold Coast, and they came to Las Vegas for a wedding, and they said, while we're in America, we better get to the Country Squire. And so they made a special trip to come see us.
Cool.
We've had folks do cross-country tours of the United States, folks from Austria and Italy, they've made sure on their cross-country tour of the United States to spend an entire day in Jackson, Mississippi, so they could hang out at a real pipe shop.
Wow.
It's just amazing. I still marvel at it, and I'm so thankful for it, because it was I'd call it a fluke, but I don't believe in flukes. It was a kindness for us.
So what did it take to put out an episode every week for 10 years?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, you have the benefit of talking to interesting people. Of course, you get desperate and have folks like me on here. But the content comes because you're interviewing folks, and everyone's different, and they've got different stories and all this kind of stuff. But we talked about pipes for 10 years every week. Now, I'm a proud pipe smoker.
Yeah.
I love the doggone pipe.
Yeah.
But at some point, the history of the pipe cleaner, or, what the best, pipe shape is for, fishing, it can feel a little stretched.
We're reaching. Yeah. We're researching the history of the pipe cleaner. That one kills me.
And I tell you what, Hunter, it's got a history.
Oh, I believe it.
It's got it, and a good one.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of our topics were really interesting and fun, and we took some liberties with it. We did some pairings, tobacco and bourbon kind of stuff that was really popular, and we kind of dovetailed our storytelling. So much of what we did and what I still do is storytelling about our pipe smoking and the history and our business, our shop and all this stuff. But, we got to do deep dives on historical figures, real and fiction, that were pipe smokers.
Yeah.
And, what were they smoking and how did that play into their character?
Are there any of those that really stick out to you that you remember, historical figures?
Yeah. I think the most interesting one to me is the man who isn't confirmed, but may have been the first person to scale Mount Everest.
Wow.
His name was George Mallory. And George Mallory was a British chap who died trying to scale Mount Everest in the 1920s, and he was a well-known pipe smoker. And learning about his life, his experiences, and then the final journey up Mount Everest in the 1920s, where they lost him. They saw him from the ground. They saw him going up. He got lost in the clouds, and no one ever knew if he made it to the top. And of course, Sir Edmund Hillary was the person who did confirmed scale Mount Everest successfully and then returned safely in the 1950s. And
so that was 30 years before.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was 30 years before.
Yeah.
After that.
That's exactly right.
Crazy.
And what was fascinating, there's a great, you can find it on YouTube today, in the late 90s, they found George Mallory's body on the side of Mount
I was
Everest.
wondering if they did find it.
They found it, and it was mummified essentially. And being a good Englishman, the guys that were there, they actually gave him an Anglican funeral,
really?
Right there on the side of the mountain. And but he had certain things in his pockets that they found. Again, this is 80 years later,
yeah, preserved,
right? It's preserved. He'd been on the side of the mountain untouched in this, like, it's so cold up there that you're basically entombed out in the open, right? And so everything's just preserved. And he had broken his leg, and they could kind of piece together how he had died. But there was still the question: did he make it to the top? And he had all these things in his pockets, but the thing in his pocket he was missing, that he said he was going to leave at the top, was a picture of his wife.
Really? So he probably did make it.
And so there's the question, right? Yeah, it's like, well, I don't know. We can all dream. We'll never know.
Mount Everest is fascinating to me. I read the book Into Thin Air. I don't know if you've read that book.
Yeah.
And they use dead bodies as marks to where they are on the mountain.
That just blows my mind to think like, oh, the guy with the green boots, if you make it to him, then you're almost to this turn or whatever. And it's like, that's just, there's, again, like you said, there's just these bodies that it's so hard to get these bodies off the mountain that they just leave them there.
And then they're preserved and they look almost like they just died in some cases.
They're wearing their North Face jacket from 1992,
right?
And it's just it's like a morbid time capsule.
Yeah, that's wild. So the podcast ended 500 episodes, and I know you had a special 500th episode.
We did.
Tell me about that.
It was really, really special. Of course, at that time we kind of, to be honest with you, had become celebrities in the pipe world. Which I tell an off-color joke. It's like it's. That I'll say here, and you can edit it out if you want to. But
we'll leave it. Being
a celebrity in the pipe world is like being the tallest midget. You're the tallest midget, but you're still a midget. And but we were at the top of our game and had friends that were all over the world. These are people that had been in my wedding and become very dear friends. We'd vacationed with some of them, and they'd visit our shop multiple times, stayed at my home. Again, just people that were very dear to me and still are, that we met through that podcast. And we had done it 10 years, and I was tired. I was tired. I really was, doing it every week, the prep and the engagement. And frankly, as someone who's become pretty introverted, it's hard week after week to get on mic.
Yeah.
It's difficult. It's difficult to talk every week on mic. And I was sharing with you when we were talking about this. I think I don't know if it was Bill Burr or Jim Gaffigan, one of these comedians I follow, but he said, like, you don't want to be the guy with the boat, right? Boats are a big problem.
Yeah.
You want to be the guy that gets on the boat. He shows up, he's got the 6-pack of beer, and it's like, no, you want to be friends with the guy with the boat.
Right.
Well, I don't want a podcast, Hunter. I want to be the guy that shows up on the podcast and gives you good content, and you're going to have fun, and we're going to make memories and all this kind of stuff. But you know what? You get to deal with that.
You don't have to worry about the camera turning off or all that.
You don't have to worry about that.
No, I like that.
It's really true. After a decade of doing it, and doing it through the most formative years of my life too, truly, it was time to hang it up. By that time, it had become a lot easier to produce a podcast, and so your iPhone now does such good audio that you can record a decent audio just on your iPhone standing in the middle of a room. And so there were other shows that had started to pop up.
I was going to ask if there are some pipe shows now.
And now there's several really, really good ones. Yeah, there really are. And I've gotten to be friends with some of those folks, in a couple instances, really good friends. And it's kind of neat in our industry to be thought of as like the retired veteran old dog. I'm 42, but that kind of hung up his microphone, but folks still look to in that sense. That's kind of a neat experience, really.
It's funny because when I first started getting into CrossFit, I got really into this a fitness podcast called Barbell Shrugged, and it was based out of Memphis, and it was the CrossFit Memphis guys started it, and I would listen to it, and then it just blew up and took off,
exploded,
and they don't do it anymore. I think one of the guys has his own podcast, but a couple other, one of them I end up passing away, and another guy just kind of does other stuff. But it's still to this day, people will mention like fitness podcasts, and that's the original one. Everybody remembers Barbell Shrugged.
I'm telling you, man, and because again. Bo was right. He figured it out. He read the future on this deal. When you're podcasting, and it's done well, which you do here, you're in people's ear and you're telling stories and inviting people into that story. It's a very and it's different from YouTube. It's different from. We're on YouTube and, we love video and all that, but there's something about having someone's voice in your ear when you're walking or cooking or running or going to work. It's really powerful.
Yeah.
And one of the most fascinating things about that podcast happened to me actually a year ago after we'd quit. I was at one of these pipe shows. I don't know if it was Las Vegas or Chicago or Texas, one of them, I can't remember. But a guy came up to me and he had just found our podcast. Now remember, we'd been off the air at this point for a couple of years, right? But everyone's still listening to those episodes, going back through that catalog and enjoying, or I forget, I need to know something about this particular thing. Let me see if they had an episode on that.
Right.
It happens all the time. And so this cat was new to pipe smoking, and he had found our podcast. And this was 2024, and he'd started listening to the podcast from the very beginning, and he'd made it up till about 2016. And when he caught me at one of these shows, he recognized what I look like, and we started chatting. It was like talking to a time capsule of myself.
Yeah.
Because the guy was asking me questions like, how's it going with the business that you're managing? It's like, well, I bought the business.
Yeah, I bought it.
and the guy was like, well, did you marry the girl? And it's like, yeah, the girl's my wife, and we have 2 kids. And well, how's your dog? Well, she's dead. These things that I'd mentioned regularly on the show. And, how's so-and-so that works for you? And it's like, man, that kid hadn't worked for me in, 8 years.
I forgot all about him.
And he's got a PhD now and teaches at a school, all this crazy stuff. It's,
wow.
It was really fascinating. Yeah. That was a neat experience. Really was. But anyway, podcasting it was powerful for our brand.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the actual purchase. Okay. So, you decide, talk about it, you decide to buy the business, and, what was going through your head at that time?
So it's 2016, right? Yeah. And, again, you're talking about betting your career on, and your resources on something that the world has decided is bad for you. Over the years, your grandmother was right. Pipe smokers do live longer. College studies. Cigar smokers officially live as long as non-smokers. And of course, cigarette smokers live significantly less longer than non-smokers. But over the years, our industry, premium tobacco, has been lumped in with the cigarette folks. And so there is this ecosystem of, we have been kind of grafted into, unfortunately, that makes it difficult for us to do business. When we do credit card processing on our website, we sell premium, hand blended tobacco with this, really hard to get leaf from places like Cyprus and, Brazil and, in Virginia and Kentucky. And, we sell these artisan pipes that are, hand carved by these, people that have been doing it for 2 and 3 generations in small town in northern Italy and all this stuff. So all this really high end stuff, right, that we're selling. And we get lumped in when we process our credit cards with like dog fighting, gambling, like all kinds of stuff that is super seedy. And so it's hard for us to do business anyway. So you're thinking, is this really the right move? But I think for me, it had to be. As I mentioned before, in my 20s, after college, I just felt aimless. I was confused. I was low. I didn't have a good self-esteem, or I didn't believe in myself. I didn't feel like there was a clear future for me. And that was all wrapped up in my identity. And then the Country Squire found me. And the Lord used it to batter my heart, and I became a lot more secure in who I was in Christ. Your grandmother was a big part of that. Your mom was an even bigger part of that. I built some manhood emotional muscle at the Country Squire that I had always lacked. And I couldn't imagine my life without that goofy little smoke shop. I couldn't.
Yeah.
And it was either purchase the business and keep it going and take a risk on our story, your family's story, and the little part that they allowed me to play, or start over. What was I going to do? Go be a teller at a bank? I had a history degree. The History Factory's not hiring.
The History Factory.
I had to figure it out, and so I decided to take a risk. My folks thought I was nuts, and half my friends did too, but the Lord had something really good for me in store, and it's worked out. So
that's interesting. That reminded me of, I had one of our original head coach on, and I was talking to him about when I brought him on at Coyote. I don't remember this, but we sat down to have a conversation about him coming to work at Coyote, and he was hesitant about it because it was a startup. And he said, "Hunter, what do you think is the reason that's going to make Coyote successful?" And he said that. I replied, "Because I have to." And I felt the same way at the time. It's like, I have to do this. Has to work. Like I can't go back to this other job. I have to make this work. And I don't know. It's something about that feeling of, I don't know how it's going to work, but I'm going to make it work because I know this is the right step for me. And obviously it's worked out for you. Well, how did you progress from signing on the dotted line to now this is my shop? I got to make this work.
It happened very quickly. At that point, I was again dating my now wife and was thinking about the future. And, I went into that, whole process. I'd kind of been in this Zen state where I was just content to float a little bit. And I was like, if I make a little money, that'd be great, but I really just want to run my shop. But then, life started bringing responsibilities, in addition to what I'd already, had. I mean, I had bills that came in. I needed repairs on my home and my car. And there were nice things I wanted to do that I'd never done before, and people I wanted to hire. And, all of that requires more revenue. And so we, put a full court press effort on, the biggest thing was getting our shop properly capitalized, but then also properly, full of inventory. You can't sell what you don't have, kind of thing, And so just getting pipes on the shelf, cigars on the shelf, accessories that are appealing to, people's, sensibilities. I knew pretty early that in the Jackson area, if you were a pipe smoker, you had already found us years ago because we were that goofy little pipe shop, right? everyone was like, oh, if you smoke a pipe, you go to the Country Squire. You know, they don't do much else, but they do the pipe, you know. So I knew in the local area we had, you know, if you're a pipe smoker, you had already found us. Our growth, it could only come from two places. Online, introducing our pipe story to the world, which we had started doing, but then locally becoming a player in the cigar market.
Right.
And just so you know, like the pipe industry, you know, for those that aren't into premium tobacco products, like it is such a small rounding error in the greater ecosystem than cigars. You know, it is so tiny. I mean, we go to these huge, you know, premium tobacco trade shows, and you know, the pipe folks have 2 or 3 tables out of a giant warehouse full of, you know, these big glamorous cash-filled cigar companies. But I knew locally to grow, if we were going to grow locally, it had to be with the cigar. And so we doubled down on finding the right brands and having a bunch of them. And that was a big part of our growth, you know. And then and also, like, you know, we had been in Jackson for decades at this point, and people wanted to shop with us. They liked me, they liked your mom, they liked your grandparents. They wanted to buy from us, but we had to carry the things that they wanted to buy.
Right.
And as soon as we started doing it, they were like, well, I'm coming back to the Country Squire.
Yeah.
You know? And they flooded in, Hunter. It was so neat during that season when we were really reintroducing cigars to our market here in Jackson by going stronger in that. I'm getting chill bumps as I'm sitting here talking about it, because I remember a specific story where a guy came in and he loved shopping with your grandmother back in the 90s. But he was really a cigar guy now and felt like they just didn't have a lot for him at the Squire. And he was like, I'm just excited I get to come back here.
Wow.
And he was telling me these stories that I'd never heard from the 80s and 70s at the Country Squire.
Wow.
Isn't that funny?
That's awesome.
So it's like people wanted to give us their money. We just had to have something to put in their hand, you know? And so we really did. We doubled down on that. And that was a big part of our growth. Part of that too, about a year and a half into owning the business at that point, our landlord forced us to move into a unit that was next door to our original unit. And I didn't want to do it and felt really upset about it all. And, you know, we'd been in there for so long. But there again, it was just the Lord nudging us in a direction that stubborn Jon David, who didn't want to take any risks, wasn't willing to make his, you know, the decision himself to do. And our humidor, which is humidor is a cigar room you walk into that keeps the cigars fresh. Cigars have to be kept at a certain humidity and temperature in order to stay smokable and fresh and all that kind of stuff. And so you have a humidor room that you know, controls all this. And so we moved into this new space, and our humidor grew 3 times. And I was like, man, we'll never be able to fill this up, and you know, there's just no way. And we ran out of room almost overnight.
Wow.
You know, but people just responded to us. They wanted to be a part of our community because we'd always been a little different. You know.
Well, one thing I noticed when I went is to the newest space is how big the cigar humidor is now, number one, but how much Arturo Fuente you have.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Is that what you went heavy on?
Well, and we did. So and that's actually our newest space. So we, as I've owned the Country Squire, we've been in 3 locations now. The original location and this intermediate location where I kind of got on my feet a little bit as a real operator and you know, and small business person. And then our current location. So I could read the future a little bit, knowing, look, if you're going to be in the premium tobacco industry, or really the tobacco industry at all, going into the future where people are super health conscious, you're going to have to be in a standalone building. You got to be. Because, you know, we were in a strip mall where we were right next door to a coffee shop, and, you know, the folks at the coffee shop were always complaining about the smoke and the crowds and, you know, all this stuff. You know, we had apartments right above us, and I always grieved for those poor people up there, like, oh, their apartment probably smells like cigar smoke. And I just knew at some point our landlord at the quarter, frankly, was gonna kick us out.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew it was gonna happen, and I started looking for property about 3 years ago.
Okay.
About 3 years ago, and there was this hibachi restaurant.
Yeah.
A couple of blocks down from our original location. It was called Bonsai, and they wanted to retire. And there again, it was just kind of the planets aligned. It was this precious, gift. I felt like I'd been just, dropped in my lap of this opportunity to buy this 5,300 square foot building that's only a couple blocks away from our location. And so we weren't asking our clientele to, drive across town or anything. It was right there. Mm-hmm. Standalone building, huge parking lot, lots of visibility. Like, it was just clear. And so I was hell bent on, us getting in that building and operating in this much larger space where we could be secure for the long term. Mm-hmm. Because the thing that kept me up the most at night was our location insecurity. Mm-hmm. I'm getting to your question about Arturo Fuente.
Yeah, no.
So we had this gigantic humidor, right? Again, the humidor is the room the cigars go in. When we designed the interior of our building, it's one of the sneakiest things I've ever done. But I sent spies to all the other big cigar shops in the state of Mississippi and had measurements taken.
Wow. On
our competitors' humidors.
Wow. What were they walking or
clandestinely? They would walk in and use their iPhone and
Really?
And so I got some measurements taken of all the other large humidors in Mississippi. And I said, I want the biggest humidor in the state of Mississippi.
I love it.
And the biggest one, I won't mention the company. They run a fine company. It's a good competitor, worthy competitor, and they run a tight ship and should be proud of what they do. But they have a very large humidor in another part of our state. And when I got the measurement back, I was a little surprised. I was like, I thought it was bigger than that because I'd been in that store before. So I sent 2 more spies
to double check. Check his work.
And so when we built our humidor in Jackson, we made sure we were 130 square feet bigger than the biggest humidor at the time in the state. So we have the largest cigar selection in Mississippi, which we're very proud of now.
How many square feet is your humidor?
I'm not going to tell you.
Okay, you don't want to put it out there.
The reason I'm not going to tell you is that the published amounts of our competitor's humidor is not accurate. It's a whole nother podcast, Hunter. Yeah. But we are the largest, and I'm proud of that. So anyway, we've got this huge humidor, and it's like the humidor has to have an identity. Like we've always been a pipe shop, and when you walk in our new store, which we just opened 4 months ago, you see pipes. They're everywhere. There's tobaccos and pipes and pipe accessories, and we're proud of that. But we had to acknowledge that now we've become locally, Jackson's cigar shop too. Mm-hmm. And we fought hard for it. And so I wanted that very visible up front as well when you walk in the front door. And there's a very venerated, honored, historic brand in the cigar world called Arturo Fuente. Arturo Fuente, 100-year-old company, very, very well respected and regarded, incredibly high-end cigars. They actually make some accessible cigars as well. So if you're someone that just wants a knock-around cigar for the weekend, they have something for you. But also some of the highest-end cigars in the world are made by this company. And the Country Squire had proudly carried their products almost since we had opened in the early 70s. So the Fuente was trying to revitalize its brand. It was the early 70s. And Carlos Fuente, the owner at the time, he was making a tour through the Southeast and stopped himself at the Country Squire, met your grandfather, and opened up our Fuente account himself. And we've had a Fuente account since then. And Mrs. Reeves, she was always people knew, look, if you're looking for a Fuente, just go see Gwen.
Yeah.
Like she's
I can't tell you how many Opus X I remember selling, and people would call all the time asking about Opus X.
Gobbling them up. Yeah. And it's one of those things, like all these other stores couldn't get them, but that old lady at the Country Squire, she's got them.
I knew we could get them. I didn't know the reason why we could get them, but I knew we had them and nobody else had them.
She had them for decades.
Yeah.
And the Fuente family is it's a very old-fashioned family. These are Dominican folks that are former Cubans, and just they're very tight-knit. They're very loyal. And your grandmother and the Reeves family just had such a tight-knit connection with the Fuentes, and still does. And so we were like, look, when we open this humidor, which will be the jewel of our state in the cigar industry, we're gonna anchor it with Arturo Fuente, and we did. And I started, we told the Fuente company about this, and they're nice too. They've always loved the Country Squire. We sell a lot of their products, and they were like, "Oh, that's good. We're excited about that," and "Oh, that's interesting and good." But then I started sending them pictures, and they were like, "Oh, you're serious about this?"
Yeah.
And so we have one of the few Fuente-centric shops, probably in the United States.
Wow.
But when you walk in, we have a Arturo Fuente anchor, and almost every cigar they put out, we have,
wow.
or have had at some point. A lot of them are limited editions at this point. But and again, have folks call from all over the world, and we have these products on our website now. It's last week we sold a $1,500 box of cigars, some fancy Fuente thing that they came out with, and so anyway, we wanted to make sure that tie was really honored and connected. There again, we're in the storytelling business.
Yeah, and that's so cool. And I didn't know, and like I said, I grew up in the store, and I didn't know that. How did you design the new store and then decide to add the bar as well? How did that come about?
Yeah, so we do have a cocktail lounge now. So we were looking for property, and they had just changed the law in Mississippi. Actually, one of my competitors was instrumental in getting this passed. I think at the time he didn't really think that we were a threat in our industry, but we've proven obviously to be very formidable, and we're thankful for that. But they had a law passed in our state legislature that allowed cigar shops of a certain size to sell liquor by the glass without selling food. We're the only industry in Mississippi that gets around the food requirement of the liquor laws. It's the craziest thing, and people are like, "Really?"
Yeah.
But it did get through our state house and became law. And so cigar shops now of a certain size, we can sell cocktails and wine without selling food. And so we, in our new building, made sure to, we're like, well, I actually had some pause about that, because I was like, well, we're opening a bar. Like that's different from our DNA. As you know, being a young man, like, bars come with a certain, vibe and their own problems and issues and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, well, do I really want to kick over that, anthill and deal with all those issues? And we were always very premium tobacco centric, and I didn't want to lose that identity. But I realized that our competitors were moving in that direction, and we needed to move in that direction, but we had to do it the right way. And so we committed to doing it at a very early stage, and did. So when you walk in our building, you'll notice right up front, you can see, when you're standing at the front door, you can see everything that we do. We want to be very clear about who we are. The first thing you see are pipes. Even though pipes now, our local business is 90% cigar, the first thing you see is pipes, because it's what makes us interesting, special. It's our story, which is unique, and people like to talk about that and identify us with the pipe. So you see pipes immediately. Then you see the cigar room, which is just beautiful, lots of glass, and so you can look in there and really identify, wow, they've got a great selection. But then you can also see off to the side our cocktail lounge. Mm-hmm. And it's very warm and inviting. We wanted it to all be very free-flowing with people to be able to experience kind of all these touch points within a certain area, or, within walking into the building. I knew I wasn't going to get it right, though. Again, at this point, I'm a retailer, right? I'm a seminary dropout who got a history degree and sell pipe tobacco and cigars for a living. Like, I'm not in the design business. I don't, know anything about furniture or paint colors or any of this kind of stuff. And I knew I needed help. Mm. Every premium cigar country in this shop, almost every one of them, there are a few that are done really well, but so many of the premium cigar lounges in America look like they look like a wife went to Hobby Lobby and got a bunch of stuff she thought was masculine looking, and then came and did their bonus room in like brown and animal skin and old golf clubs, and like it's just this thing. Like, you go in almost any premium cigar shop in the country, and like you just get the sense that like there was a wife at some point that went to Hobby Lobby to make this happen. And I just knew our story was it was just too precious to do that. We had, and I knew I didn't have the chops to make it happen the way the Country Squire deserved it to happen. Again, this historic business that, we had, people in the 70s had watched Triple Crown, watched Secretariat win the Triple Crown in our store, and people had met their spouses in our store, and, Willie Morris and Jerry Clower had shopped in our store, and like we just couldn't move into this space and not really think about how we were going to design it. And so I spent, it was a big line item in our budget, but I hired a professional designer. His name is Bradley Adair. His company is Land versus Ocean, and he has spent years and years in this industry. He knows a lot about commercial furniture, design trends and elements. He's been a part of the designs of many of the most popular trendy restaurants in Jackson in the past 15 years. And he was expensive, and it was worth every dime, and I would have paid double if I could have.
Wow.
Because he got to know our business. He took time to understand our DNA, our story, my heart and my values, what was important to us and what could be kind of jettisoned from our business model moving into this new space. And he knitted all that together with my help, and created this, Taj Mahal of premium tobacco here in Jackson, Mississippi. And I couldn't have done it without him. And so our guiding star in this whole design process, when your grandmother and grandfather founded the Country Squire in 1970, it was a premium, a luxury retailer in Jackson, Mississippi in 1970. And so our guiding star was really, what did a premium retailer in 1970 look like? We still had a lot of the old furniture, and a lot of our accessories and decor and stuff kind of came from that era. But it wasn't enough to fill up a 5,300 square foot building. And now we've got all these new walls to paint, and chairs to buy, and furniture, and materials to use on the bar and in the bathrooms and everywhere else. And that was our North Star. Was, what did a premium shopping experience feel like in 1970? And let me tell you, he crushed it. And you walk in there, and it's not kitschy. You don't get the sense that there's no disco ball, there's no bell bottoms, but there's a little touch of that mid-century flair. There's lots of kind of rusty color reds and yellows and greens and browns, and it feels just like us, and I'm really proud of it. It's a premium experience.
Yeah. I agree. I was just blown away when I did it and took the tour. And one thing that really meant a lot to my mom and to our family is how much you have kept the legacy and the heritage of my grandparents involved in the store, and continue to tell their story. And you know it so well in so many ways. You know a lot of their story better than I do, and it's just so cool to see that what they built has progressed and grown into what it is today. And to walk in there, that's exactly the feel that you get when you walk in the store.
I hope your grandmother would be proud, man. I don't know what she would think about us selling cocktails. I don't know that part. Although she did enjoy the occasional nightcap herself. I have her last bottle of whiskey, by the way.
Wow.
I don't know if you know that.
I did not know that.
I'll tell you about that sometime.
Yeah.
She didn't drink good whiskey, but she did drink whiskey. And it's one of those things where I do hope that they would be proud of what we've done, because folks now from across the country, they know about the Country Squire. Mm-hmm. But one thing that is very, and I just take this seriously, and there's probably some Tolkien-esque, thoughts to this as well, but I feel the role of a caretaker. There's going to be someone that comes after me. The Country Squire is so much bigger than me or any other person. It is an institution.
Wow.
That is important to Jackson. It's important to our industry, pipe smoking, and now cigars too. I am caring for it until the next guy comes along, and then I'll pass it to them, and they'll care for it too. It's too important to be about one person, and I think that's what your grandparents would have.
Oh, and they would absolutely love it. And I never got to meet my grandfather, but I can just hearing the stories of what kind of man he was. I know
larger than life.
Yeah, I know he would have been. Yep. It would have been the store he could have dreamed of, Yeah. Well, I sent you 5 questions that I ask every guest, and then we can kind of talk about what's next for you. But the first one is, what are 2 books that you loved and or had a big impact on you?
Yeah, I had to think about this a little bit. The first one I didn't have to think about at all. So I don't know how much you've interacted with Malcolm Gladwell and his material. He's kind of a pop sociologist, Some people criticize him because he paints with broad brushstrokes and all this kind of stuff. But his book Outliers was a read of mine that I've probably given that book away. I don't know, a dozen times, and I've read it almost that many times. Like, Outliers was important to me. It's the story of how successful people accomplished what they did and the extraordinary circumstances that gave them that opportunity. Mm-hmm. It's a great read. Whether you're in business or just curious about how the world works, you need to read it. Really fascinating. But it's the story, he traces the stories of all these incredibly accomplished people, Alexander Graham Bell and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and, all these incredibly accomplished folks. But he traces the story of the unique set of circumstances that gave them the opportunity to work really hard to do what they did. Mm-hmm. And, after I read it about 5 times, I kind of realized, this is a little bit of my story. You have to work really hard, but for the people that accomplish these crazy things, Bill Gates was the richest person in the world, and, all this other stuff. It's not just a lot of hard work. Mm-hmm. You have to be given an opportunity to work really hard. And these folks either recognized it or didn't, but did work hard at just the right time. Mm-hmm. And it created something incredibly memorable and special. The Beatles, or, he goes through all these different success stories of the past. And, it was a good perspective, because you have to work hard, but it's also not all up to you.
Oh, yeah.
It's also not all up to you.
Mm-hmm. I've read that book, and I think about that a lot, and it's not just the work that you put in, but it has to be the right work in the right place at the right time. And for all those examples that you gave, if one little thing had would have been different, nobody would ever know who they were because it wouldn't have worked.
He lists, of all the wealthiest people in history, a significant percent of them were born in the 1830s in the United States.
Right.
Which is crazy to me. But the reason for that is they came along at just the right time to, number one, not have their family devastated by war, but number two, to have built enough wealth to take advantage of the need for railroads to proliferate across the United States. Mm-hmm. And it just generated, we think we know wealthy people today, this fabulous wealth that created the Gilded Age in the 19th century came from a set of people that were born in one decade. It was the right time, but they also had to work really hard and to be smart. And that's fascinating to me.
Yeah, I agree.
So love that book. A more recent book that I started reading for one reason, but then enjoyed for a different reason, but it has started to affect me more, is it's a book called The Body Teaches the Soul, and it's by Justin Earley. I was just browsing through Amazon looking for something interesting to read, and the title caught me, and I started reading a little bit about this book, and Justin's premise is that you can't separate your body and your spirit. Your spiritual well-being is very much caught up with your body's well-being, and that is by design. There is a reason the Lord God came here in a bodily form to deal with us. And our bodies inherently aren't bad things. We are not Gnostics. We don't think the body is something to be rid of. Our body is a blessing, and in some way will be a part of our story even in eternity. And his whole book is centered around that premise. And I would encourage anyone to read that book, even if you're not necessarily a Christian person. You should read the book. It talks about the importance of what we physically do and how it is connected to our identity, but then also how we need to not necessarily be idols of our physical body. And so it's just this fascinating give and take that I've really enjoyed. And he talks a lot about breathing and diet, and of course exercise, and habits, and sleep, and all these other things, sex, and things that are important to our physical experience. And so anyway, great book, and I've enjoyed it a lot too.
That shut off, but I'm just going to keep going.
Okay.
I'm just going to go, and
Great.
I got yours going, so it's fine.
Cool.
Rhymes edited out.
Yeah.
Second question: what's a piece of advice that really stuck with you?
Someone told me one time, and I can't remember who it was, but it's always at the front of my mind being in business. And it's the quote, "It's never as good as you think, and it's never as bad as you think." Now, this is not a particularly optimistic saying, but I am very grateful for this little saying. It's never as good as you think, and it's never as bad as you think. That idea are like the bumpers on the side of my bowling lane. Because as soon as I start getting too optimistic or too excited, I remember we have threats, and we have reasons to hedge as a business owner, and and so you get excited about the highs, but you also continue to squirrel away for the lows. But when the lows come if you've done your job right, it's not as bad as you think. You know, it's not. You know, if you've done your job, then you're not. You know, a few bad days in a row are not an existential threat to, you know, your business model or whatever. So one of my employees, who is very much a pessimist, he told me one time, every silver lining has a dark cloud. Isn't that a terrible quote? It's like so sad. Every silver lining has a dark cloud. I hate that, and yet, you know, you remember, like, hey, we're going to be thankful for this today, and we're going to prepare for tomorrow.
That's good. That's good. What's the hardest season of your life that you're now most grateful for?
It was right along the time your grandmother and mom hired me. I struggled mightily at that time with self-doubt and fear and self-hatred, really, and depression, and that's when the Country Squire sucked me in. Was that exact season. It was dark, and I remember coming to work, and your grandmother, she would read her little devotionals, and she'd have one opened on my desk. She'd said, hey, after you get settled today, I want you to read this and tell me what you think about it. And those were sweet times, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. A lot of that season really formed me into who I am, and I think what does John Piper say? He's like, you know, don't waste your suffering. So, and I think that season is not wasted on me.
Wow.
So,
what's something about you that would surprise people who think they know you?
My first paycheck I ever got was from the Mississippi Republican Party. And if you knew me today, you would just realize how far I am from the political world. You know, I've become pretty granola in a lot of my beliefs. And of course, I you know, one thing about being in the tobacco industry is it will make you a libertarian pretty fast.
I believe that.
I was my first job I ever got was the Mississippi Republican Party. They hired me as a staff member. I worked for them for a couple of years, and actually in 2000, when George W. Bush was nominated to be president, I went to the Republican National Convention that year in Philadelphia. And at the time, our senator from Mississippi was one of the most powerful senators in Congress. His name was Trent Lott. And so we had great seats because Mr. Lott got to pick, Mississippi's going to be up front, right? So I was standing maybe 25 feet from George W. Bush when he gave his speech at the nominating convention, and the balloons fell.
Wow.
And it was electric.
I bet.
And I cannot see myself there now in any universe. but it was a really neat experience, and I'm glad I got to do that.
Last one. What's something you used to believe strongly that you've completely changed your mind on?
I used to be almost kind of puritanical about, you know, look, if you're going to be a follower of the Lord, you need to live an austere life that it shows no excess of any kind. And now I believe that it is okay for a believer to have nice things. I remember just shaming people in my head for owning a nice pair of shoes.
Wow.
Or having trendy clothing, or, you know, driving a decent car, as if I was, you know, impressing the Lord by, wearing pants that I got at Walmart. And there are times for austerity. There are times for not, you know, indulging in your worldly, pursuits or whatever. But doggone it, it's okay to go buy a nice pair of jeans. It was this really interesting kind of twisted puritanical mindset that I grew up with, and it really affected my childhood a lot. We didn't take vacations, and I kind of judged the people that did, and the folks that had nice cars and clothing, and I thought that was almost sinful of them. It was an interesting crucible I kind of grew up with mentally and emotionally, and I don't know. I had to get healthy enough in my faith and also in understanding God's love for me that didn't depend on any of that. Imagine that. To come to the fact that, it's okay. It's okay to have nice things. Yeah.
What was the
lot
catalyst?
To unpack there.
Yeah. What was the catalyst that made you change? Was it changing churches or a mentor or anything at all?
I felt like I mentioned earlier, that growing up I was really arrogant and still am and still struggle with that. Lord, forgive me and help me repent. But I remember thinking as a kid, man, God is lucky to have me on his team.
Wow.
Isn't that awful? But it's true. And there was a real self-flagellating pride that came with growing up without those things, and it was wicked and had to be put to death. And again, we're not supposed to idolize things of this earth, but go buy yourself a cool pair of Nikes. That's okay. And God's not going to love you less for that if you're still, giving and feed your family.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was adding something to the work of the Lord by kind of artificially living in that way. And it's only really, I think, until I actually became a believer later in life and understood the gospel for the first time that the extravagance I had was by God's grace alone, that I was kind of healed of that. Yeah.
So you say you became a believer later in life, but you mentioned growing up.
Yeah, it was an interesting experience. I grew up, with Christian parents, and and they led me. I had a great childhood. I really did. It was safe and. Had everything I needed. But we didn't go to church, and I wasn't really raised around, a lot of any kind of ecosystem, I guess, where, I was being really fed and understood anything. And so I really thought God was kind of lucky to have me on his team, And I encountered the Lord in college through a ministry called Reform University Fellowship, RUF, and just realized at that point that the Lord really loved me just because he chose me before the foundation of the earth and cared for me. He made me beautiful, and I don't have to add anything to that other than following him and trusting him with my life. And I think that's the first time I really believed that, believed the gospel, that Christ did the work for me. I think that's the first time I really embodied that. And so I kind of say I was, converted in college because that's when it became true to me. Yeah.
You're married and you have 2 kids now.
Yep.
How has having kids affected how you build your business?
Yeah, it's brutal, as you know.
Yeah.
It's being a business owner is one of the hardest things you'll ever do, but it's not as hard as being a dad. That's the hardest thing I'll ever do, especially for someone that's as selfish as I am. there's a lot of sacrifice involved. And as someone that has become somewhat of a workaholic, there are so many evenings and times when I feel obligated to be at my business, working and striving and planning and doing. But by golly, I really need to be at home doing bath time. Or I really need to be at home just playing, Army Men with my son for 40 minutes before he goes to bed. And that's a dying to self thing that I didn't really anticipate going into fatherhood. You're not always super eager to, read another story about Winnie the Pooh, but sometimes that's exactly what you're supposed to do. And the work-life balance is difficult. Our kids are just now getting old enough to where they're about to start the pursuits of, we're going to try soccer and maybe play an instrument and, these kind of things. And so I get the sense that, our evenings are about to be occupied by a lot of that stuff. And you've got kids in similar ages, so you know what I'm talking about. But and so that'll be my charge is to thread the needle well. And also be a decent husband. That dates your wife and loves your wife and glorifies her and everything else.
Yeah, how do you make that a priority?
Yeah, it's just a decision you have to make. It is a decision you have to make. I am going to live this way with my spouse. I'm going to live this way with my kids. If you wait on feelings, you're not going to make it. If you wait on when you feel like it's a good time to serve your wife or serve your kids, you're not going to make it. You have to decide it in your mind, and your feelings and emotions will follow your decisions.
Wow,
that's how we're wired, and it works almost every time.
So the Country Squire has been open since 1970. Where do you hope it is 20 years from now? And how do you hope it continues to honor Jim and Gwen?
Yeah, that's a great question. I hope it's still in business and hasn't been regulated out of business. When you're in the tobacco industry, it's just a very highly regulated business, and now we have a cocktail lounge too, and so I've added another highly regulated business on top of that. But you just hope premium tobacco will still be around. Interesting, your grandmother always told me that they named the Country Squire that because if a premium tobacco shop didn't work in Jackson, they could pivot to something else.
Wow.
With a name like the Country Squire, you sell top hats or golf clubs or whatever you want, gift shop or, clothing. And, what's fascinating is that may still come in handy one day, So we are on our knees about that daily, that the Lord would bless our work and sustain it. But we have to be on our toes. A year ago, I would have told you, man, I'd love to open another location and have, stores all over. After going through the brutal, move of developing this big building, contractors, designers, all the legal stuff involved, renovations, and I don't know. I don't know if I've got it in me, to be honest with you. I really don't. So I'd like the Country Squire to continue to be a force in our community and a beacon, certainly in our industry. And one location may be enough.
Yeah. Well, as somebody who went from one location to 5 locations back to one location.
Back to one, I know. I really appreciated you sharing that with me, Hunter, because it's bigger can be better, but also bigger. You need to be thoughtful about how you want to be bigger. And you
can't be in multiple locations at once. And then when you have a family at home, and
your quality suffers, and you start thinking, well, are people getting the real experience that your grandparents would have honored and all that kind of thing? And so it might. I think my future may lie. I don't know. I could change my mind tomorrow or this afternoon for that matter. But as much as I do want to grow our business, and we do need to grow and want to grow, I think I might wind up having a little Hunter Owen in me, you know, and dabbling in a little bit of this and that. I think that kind of future sounds good to me. So we'll see where the path takes me.
Well, as someone who grew up in the store and my family grew up there, what do you want my family to know about what you've built, what you've done with what my grandparents built?
Man, that's a big question, because there's so much legacy involved. Again, I mean, folks that aren't aware of our institution, it's just a business, a shop, a retailer. But for folks that are aware of the Country Squire, both in Jackson and now worldwide, they realize that it's a very unique place, that is almost a you know, a step back in time. I would want them to know that we go to work every day, striving to be different from the world. And I think we've done a good job instilling that into our employees too. We're just always going to be a little different. Again, you know, the premium tobacco industry, you go in some cigar shops, and a lot of times you feel like it's something you almost have to apologize for, you know, because the stuff you're around and the people that are there and all this kind of stuff. And we welcome everybody and are glad that, you know, folks from all sorts of stripes come to see us. But from our side of the counter, from the part we can control, we want to be different. And it's an elevated experience, not just from a luxury standpoint or a, you know, premium standpoint. It's an elevated experience. I pray, from a heart standpoint, you know. I mentioned earlier in the show, like, you light up a pipe with someone and they will tell you whatever you want to know. I've got just enough experience in counseling to be dangerous. And Hunter, I promise you, I've done more therapy at that tobacco bar.
I believe it.
Than I ever would have done in a counseling room.
I believe it.
And so people trust you. They have honored you with their story. You're a caretaker of that if you're in my business, so you better steward it well. And we try to do that every day. Yeah.
Jon David, this was so great. I really appreciate you coming on and hearing your story. Where can people find you, visit the store, and follow what you got going on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm honored to be here, dude. Thank you so much, and proud of what you've accomplished, and so grateful for your family.
Thank you.
So our business is located at 1925 Lakeland Drive in Jackson, Mississippi, and if you're ever passing through, we would love to have you come put a pin on our map and hug our neck, and we'd love to see you and meet you and greet you and have a pipe or a cigar with you. And our website, which is about half of our business now, is thecountrysquireonline.com. And you can go on there and find our whole, array of products and read our story, things about your family and mine. We try to put a lot of that on there and get to know our staff a little bit, watch some videos. Also really active on social media, Facebook, Instagram. We recently added a TikTok thing. I don't even know how to do that, but I feel my age when it comes to that. But anyway, very active there. All of our podcasts are still available too. So if you go to iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, just look up Country Squire Radio. And if you feel like some interesting, rabbit trails related to pipe smoking, we've got lots of things for you to listen to. So
awesome. We'll get rhymes with that in the show notes as well.
That's great.
Jon David, thanks so much, man.
Thanks, Hunter.